Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Sam Jensen here. So this video is a part of a lecture that I usually give on my first night of a class. After listening to my lecture from last night, I realized it was quite a bit full of my verbal tics that I felt maybe I should probably take another crack at this. So this is my science education TED Talk. Why do we study chemistry? And why do we study science? Those are the questions that this particular talk seeks to answer. First and foremost, these things help us to understand the world around us. We can better understand the things that we put into our body and how those things interact with our body. Science in general teaches us analytical skills, critical thinking that at this point are literally a life and death skill. We need to be able to make informed decisions that affect all kinds of things in our lives. And we cannot do that if we lack the ability to discern between fact and fiction. One thing we're all likely keenly aware of after living through a pandemic is that we are connected to the other people around us. Our connection is so unique and innate at this point that it is unlike anything else in human history. The pandemic changed a lot of the way we do things. It highlighted many of our strengths as well as our weaknesses. The ramifications of our inability as a country to think critically has had a drastic effect on our society. I wrote my dissertation on outbreaks from an epidemiological, public policy, and preparedness perspective. And I can tell you from my professional experience that we lost hundreds of thousands of American lives needlessly. Hundreds of thousands of people died out of sheer gross incompetence and negligence in our response. Because of our inability to think critically and because of the individualistic me mentalities, many people had to be confronted with this harsh reality that viruses don't care about you or your freedom or your individual expression. The notions of individualism are the Bitcoin of our identity. You don't grow your own food, fix your own cars, diagnose your own disease, set your own bones, or make your own medicine. We are connected to everyone else and dependent on everyone else for a variety of things in our lives. The internet has connected ideas and values and voices that otherwise would never be heard. This also works against us, though, because it also lets bad information flourish as well. And unfortunately, lies and misinformation spread faster than education. We've been facing these issues as we struggled through a pandemic, but we face other issues like global climate change, which is a major challenge of your generation, and we are doing nothing about it. It is an objective fact that we are going to see the effects of climate change, and you cannot stop it at this point. The only thing we can control now is to what degree of severity we see. People who want to be in denial of these facts are going to be a problem in addressing solutions until the point where, when action is taken, likely won't be enough. Time is already against you. If we don't shake the cobwebs of science denial, the harsher effects will be upon us, and we'll wonder why. Why didn't we do anything sooner? And history will know that our individualism and our selfishness prevented us from doing what was right for everyone. People want to scoff at a $14 trillion Green New Deal. I always ask, what is the cost of survival on an unlivable planet? The power of hurricanes alone will rack up insurmountable costs every year to the point where trillions will be a drop in the bucket. We have the power to make changes happen from locally to globally. And I know it seems overwhelming, And we still think, what can one person do? But that's the wrong kind of thinking. That's the individualism thinking. It isn't just you. The little steps we make every day can and do have an impact. We are in this together, and we will succeed or fail together. As we study science, we learn that the only true constant in the universe is change. And science is advancing our knowledge of the world so fast, it's unlike anything else in human history, and it can be scary for people. In Taoism, they compare life to a river. It's always moving. We can learn to navigate with the current and guide ourselves to where we want to go, or we can fight the current in a vain effort to stay in one place, or worse, try to regress back and ultimately die in a futile effort. Keeping up with science and educating ourselves is necessary to help us to adjust to the flow of the river. We have to adjust our views of reality based on new evidence. That's how we work towards being better people and navigating the ever-changing reality. Education doesn't stop. This class is not an education. Education is a lifelong journey. If we want to think individually for a second, we can talk about how science helps us to understand things for our own personal health, because we need to make informed choices. Because again, while your health is important to you, your health is important to me and to those around you. Better educated societies have improved use of preventative healthcare services, improved medical literacy. They use their medications properly, and these things lead to lower healthcare costs, to lower cases of hospitalization and readmissions. The choices we make for our own health are often guided by our own understanding of chemistry or lack thereof. Unfortunately, despite what you think, we have a deplorable healthcare system for a first world nation. We have a deplorable lack of government regulations for a wide range of things you can purchase. Our system of buyer beware is morally bankrupt and will never yield positive outcomes. There is little to no repercussion for people selling parents of autistic children industrial bleach, let alone millions of products sold under the guise of supplements and wellness that have no grounding in reality. Unfortunately, the cards are stacked against you, and it becomes overwhelming. I understand. I'm a PhD scientist. I do this for a living. I'll get sucked into hours of fact-checking for random ads that I see. As I ask, does it really do that? Is that really a thing? But that becomes part of our challenge, asking ourselves, is this thing I believe true? Does this thing do what it says it does? Here's an example from a conversation not too long ago on Facebook. Someone was peddling oxygenated water. Now, in a pandemic, one might think it's morally abhorrent to make claims that your product can stop infections or strengthen the immune system. People without any understanding of biology might not realize that your stomach is not the organ that does respiration. People without any understanding of chemistry might not realize that, like soda, as soon as you pop the top, you're losing gases from the liquid. That the concentration of a single breath of air is far more oxygen than thousands of these bottles. But there's no stopping these frauds. One goes out, another comes in, and they thrive on your ignorance. So this brings us to the importance of critical thinking. Carl Sagan wrote about these things in the 90s. If you haven't read A Demon Haunted World, I highly recommend it. His writing is prophetic for the golden age of frauds we find ourselves in currently. What better time to take advantage of people than during a pandemic when people are scared for themselves or their family? Pseudoscience sells easy answers and quick fixes. And therein lies the hook, sells. And so we see otherwise regular doctors who went to real universities, not just Billy Joe Bob's hair, nail, and medical school, selling nonsense and wellness products, acting as contrarians because there's a market for bullshit and people willing to peddle it. It is my personal belief that you should not be taken advantage of because of your poor moral luck. But that's what we see throughout our society. Our well of experts is tainted by sewage who sow the seeds of doubt and denialism to the point where we've become so disconnected from reality, there's no hope of addressing real problems. Other experts in science see this as well. They see the dire use of conspiracy theories and denialism of basic science, the peddle ideologies and products that only steer us towards trying to fix imaginary problems rather than dealing with real problems that require real solutions and real thinking. If we don't study real science, how do we know where the line is between pseudoscience? Pseudoscience uses mimicry, like in biology. What is mimicry in biology? Mimicry is an animal that looks enough like something else to avoid predation. Pseudoscience engages in mimicry of real science to avoid predation. In this case, predation is critical thinking. These things only have to avoid a little bit of skepticism to thrive. If it weren't true, we wouldn't have and continue to see issues with people taking dog dewormer for their respiratory infections. These things don't want to be tested. They don't want their claims to be held to scrutiny. They can't and wouldn't stand up to any kind of real scientific rigor. And so they will avoid any kind of government regulation until such point as deeply held magical belief is sufficient evidence to allow them to continue to take advantage of the undereducated. What tools do we have to determine fact from fiction? The scientific method is a process of observation and experimentation that ultimately yields reproducible evidence that informs us about reality. The key word here is process. It is a method of gathering information. It helps us to learn how to think, not what to think. We were informed by 100 years of knowledge from hundreds of thousands of scientists in their fields, generating data from experiments that feed into our scientific theories and explain different applications of scientific laws that make a framework for our understanding of reality. The process of research, in its very name, research, means this is cyclical. As our technology advances, we see further or smaller than ever before. And that means the next time we look at something in finer detail, we might notice something we didn't the first time. This doesn't mean that science was wrong or scientists were wrong about a phenomenon, not in all cases. In many cases, this is a refinement of our understanding, an adjustment to new information. We have to get comfortable with not knowing all the answers and be humble enough to admit to ourselves that we might be ignorant on a subject. And most importantly, we have to be willing to change our ideas and beliefs in the face of evidence. Because if evidence isn't going to move you, then you have to admit you don't care about what is true. This plays out in our daily lives. We need to study science to be better people and better citizens and to act with the best information. Getting an education comes with a responsibility. Knowledge is power, and with great power comes great responsibility. Your responsibility plays out in you using your education to help those who are less information privileged. You have a responsibility to those around you in your society to use your educated voice to help better inform and guide our leaders. Because if you abdicate your voice, there are those who, as we've already seen happen, who are more than willing to take away your fundamental human rights. And if you think people will be satisfied with taking a little of your humanity away, you are sadly undereducated in human history. If the younger generation alone stood up and cast its voice, or better yet, stood up and took the reins, the future could be what you want it to be. There are undeniable scientific facts that we have to learn that are often only understood through education, like that almost everything in human existence is a spectrum of nuance. There is no such thing as binary choices. These are sold to you as a false dichotomy because it's easy, like how we teach children about morality. But in the real world, like human diversity, it exists on a spectrum of complexity that is too amazing for a simplistic palate. Learning science helps us to dig deeper into how and why things do what they do. And this can have an impact on our lives and the understanding of the world. It can even help us to better understand philosophical questions of ethical values as we better understand how things are interrelated. When we find that the world is not so cut and dry, black and white, good and bad, we find the choices that we make have to be built on substance, on evidence that is drawn from complex, changing dynamics. If we don't, then we find ourselves overwhelmed by the noise and retreat in fear of the unknown. But the unknown isn't something to be feared, but accepted as part of life. And the reason why we take the next step forward, to see where the path goes, to seek the answers through questioning, through observation and experimentation. Lastly, you're all adults. You should realize by now there are rarely good choices in life. There are usually only hard choices. Even when you do choose to do nothing, that is still a choice. Letting the trolley go straight on its horizontal path is still a choice you and a responsibility you accept, especially when the lever is right there for you to make an educated and informed decision. I know this is a little long-winded, but I'll leave you with some resources that can hopefully help you in your continued education. Here's some books that I highly recommend you check out when you get a chance. These are each a great read and worth your time. And while I realize we don't all have the luxury of time, here's a few podcasts that you can easily download and consume. I find them highly informative and of exceptional quality. I personally endorse and listen to myself. And with that, I will say thank you for your time, and I look forward to our interactions through the rest of the semester, and have a great day.